And we are live. Just going to make sure all my audio levels and everything are correct. Everything looks good. And we're going to be talking about tone today, which I'm really excited about. Sort of an interesting lesson concept because there's a lot of little things to talk about. But I'm checking the YouTube chat throughout the lesson. So if you have any questions, feel free to post in YouTube. I'll also be looking at the forums on Rock Class for the live lesson topic, playing with finesse. So if you hear some clicking of my mouse, you'll know that's what it's for. And it looks like we are good there. Make sure that's live here. Looks good. All right. So let's talk about tone, shall we? So Drew wrote a really cool little blurb about this, which is, you know, we're not just trying to play the right notes, but we're trying to play the right notes the right way. And so to really get down to this, we're going to be talking about a few different things. And the first thing that we need to talk about is the word timbre, which is spelled T-I-M-B-R-E. Yeah, that's pronounced timbre, which I think is a little bit weird. But timbre is essentially the texture of a sound, the sound of a sound. If you think about a note, like an A note, for instance, being played on a ukulele, and then if you think about that same note being, you know, sung by a female vocalist, and then you have it sung by a male vocalist, and then played by a trumpet, and then a saxophone, and then a piano, they all are playing the same A note, right? Yet there's a very big difference in sound between them. That difference in sound is the timbre, or the texture of the sound. Some timbres can be brighter, some can be warmer or darker. There's a lot of different adjectives that we use to describe the timbre of, you know, sounds that we're getting. So on a ukulele has its own timbre, right? You can kind of recognize an ukulele sound by just a ukulele being played. That being said, you can get different timbres out of your ukulele depending on how you play it. So we're going to start by talking about how we play with our thumb and how we can change the tone of our ukulele based on where we're playing. So with most of the tutorials I've done here at Rock Class and elsewhere, I use my thumb to play through and articulate the melody note as well as the harmony. But what you'll notice is the angle that that thumb is playing, as well as the location it is on the string, will have a direct impact to the tone that's being created. The most sort of stock tone that you'll see is I'll typically have my thumb right about where the fingerboard and the sound hole meet, right at this area. And I'll have my thumb about a 45-degree angle. And that will create this sort of sound, which is a really nice, really warm sound. And to go with this, I've got a little bit of nail coming over my thumb. I don't have much nail on my thumb, but definitely more than the average, you know, the average dude. Just enough to get a little bit of it catching. It's never really just the nail playing. It's more the pad of the finger actually compressing in to the nail to release. And being at that 45-degree angle right at this point gives me a very, very neutral sound. Right? Pretty cool. So what I want to do is I want to make something with a brighter timbre. So if I want more brightness, all that I have to do, I can keep the angle the same with my finger for now and just move back down towards the end of the ukulele, back towards the bridge. If I go all the way down here, I do that same thing. My brightness is sort of through the roof, right? Very, very different tone and texture to that. If I, in addition to that, have my finger start to go more perpendicular to the strings and move down towards the bridge, I'm going to get a really bright sound. I don't even like this sound, to be real, right? Kind of banjo-like. But it's not the extreme of going all the way down. It's the subtle movement downward that can really make a difference with your playing. Because if you're playing right here and you're doing something like this, and I want to go with a brighter tone, I can move my thumb back and make it a little more perpendicular. Now I'm more over the sound hole, more perpendicular. Now listen. Now the opposite's true as well. If I move up a little bit and I move my finger more to be parallel to the strings, I get a much warmer sound, a much less bright tone. So the reason why this is so important is sometimes you want that extra articulation and brightness to really bring something forward. And other times you really want something to be more withdrawn in its sound and more in the background. Pretty much any chord melody that you play, that you want the melody note to be, embellished on, you want it to really be the focal point. And then anytime you have a harmony note, you want it more behind. And this technique can facilitate that, because anytime I have a melody note, I can play it with my thumb a little bit more perpendicular, more over the strings. And then if I want the harmony to be a little softer, I go more parallel and more up here, right? So that's the main timbre-based technique that we use to get better tonality. And it can really help take your playing sort of to the next level with this sort of sound. If I'm ever playing something, really, it doesn't even matter what it is. I'm gonna just make something up. You can hear, just based on what I'm doing, there's actually a difference in terms of sound for something brighter versus something more warm, which makes you sort of listen to the brighter sound and less so on the warmer sound, which creates that sort of difference of timbre, which makes your ear gravitate towards one sound more than the other. And to really kind of sum this whole concept up with timbre, if you're listening to a band play, the vocalist will be usually the melody singing, and the rest of the band's in the background playing. There's usually a volume difference, right? The vocalist will be louder than any other piece of the band, but there's also that timbre difference. You know it's the melody because the vocalist is singing it. When we're playing a chord melody on the ukulele, we're playing the whole band and the vocalist, but it's all on a ukulele. So you might notice everything starts to sound the same and it's hard to pick out the melody notes. This technique can help facilitate that by using a brighter, a little bit more down over the sound hole technique to get the vocalist or melody parts, and then using the thumb more parallel to the strings and up here for the harmony parts. You can really start to create a sense of almost a duet being played. So it's pretty fun. So the next thing that we want to talk about from tonality after timbre is dynamics. And dynamics with this are going to be both in tone and in timing. And so this is kind of an interesting concept. And we're going to be looking a lot in terms of the dynamics with a term. And this term is rubato. Now, rubato is a musical phrase, and it means to play with feeling, which is sort of funny, right? Because we're playing music. Shouldn't it always be with feeling? A pet peeve of mine. But rubato is really trying to be, playing with emotion. And I like to think of it as more of playing almost with swells, almost playing like you're breathing. So if you think about how you breathe, very rarely do we breathe like, right? It's that would make us hyperventilate pretty quickly if we're just sitting here. When we breathe, we tend to take these sort of long, drawn-out breaths where we will increase sort of the speed of our breath as we get to the top, and then it slows way down and comes to a complete stop before we start exhaling, and it speeds up, and then it kind of slows down at the tail, right? It creates this swell-like feel. And so if we're playing our music to this feel, we end up getting more of an emotional type of sound. Because at the end of the day, music is a very human thing, and we try to emulate very human things when we're playing music. The perfect instrument's the voice, and even if you're not a huge fan of the voice, it's what we tend to emulate with the tones that we're looking for out of our instruments. We look for breaks, just like a voice will look for breaks based on breath. In fact, if you listen to somebody soloing and they just start ripping a whole bunch of notes, it gets really old really quick. But if they rip some notes and then take a small break, and then rip some notes and take a small break, it sounds much better and more natural. And the reason is because we need breaths. So we need moments to take a breath, even if we don't physically need it for what we're playing, which is kind of fun, all right? Real quick question there by Ricky was perpendicular skin versus parallel skin. Yep, so just with the perpendicularness of the finger to the actual string itself. So more parallel is going to be more warm, more perpendicular is going to be more bright, and that's even if you have a nail or don't. But anyways, the concept there of being able to play with rubato or play with feeling, I think transcends just you know, the dynamics of volume, but also has the dynamics of timing that are taken into consideration. So a little exercise that I really like to do with this is to take a very basic melody. It doesn't even matter what it is. In this case, well, let's do a little bit of Mary Had a Little Lamb, because it's very simple to play. We're just going to go 7, 5, 3, 5, and 7. We're going to be playing for the notes all here on our A string. And if I play it very, very sort of normal, I'm going to just assume one tone with my finger here, and I'm going to play it with a very regular time. And it would sound like this. And you can hear that's pretty boring, isn't it, right? Now, Mary Had a Little Lamb is always going to be boring. Let's be real. But to make it a little bit more interesting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the volume as I go, as well as alter the speed. So I'm going to play my first note, and then when I go to the second note, I'm going to play a little bit louder, and then by the time I play the third note, I'm going to play it the loudest. And as I do this, I'm going to actually speed up a little bit as I go. And then as I come back up, I'm going to start playing softer again and slow down. So this sounds like. Now, you can really think of that as the breath, where let's say I'm inhaling or exhaling. If I'm inhaling, it's. And then as I start the exhale, as the exhale sort of finishes, you'll notice that that last note sort of finishes with it. It's a really weird idea, right? Because breathing has nothing to do with the ukulele, or so it would seem. But the reality is that tying what we're playing to the breath, not necessarily literally, but rather from a figurative standpoint of that natural wave-like sensation that's created. And that really is being created by the dynamics of playing with that rubato technique, both altering the volume that we're playing with, as well as the timing, speeding up and slowing down, increasing the volume and decreasing the volume can be such a powerful tool for a melody that we're playing. So using these two concepts, right? The first one that we talked about with timbre, the second one now with rubato, I'm going to play a little bit of one of my favorite songs on the ukulele. It's an arrangement of In My Life by the Beatles, and it's a Jake Shimabukuro arrangement. And the first time I'm going to play it with none of these techniques. I'm going to just play a sneak peek of it. And then I'm going to play that same sneak peek again, and I'm going to incorporate the timbre of moving my hand in different ways, as well as the rubato of playing more with feeling, both from a dynamic standpoint of volume as well as timing. So here we go. Here's the boring way. Here's the you know, more musical way, better tone. Again, boring way. A little more entertaining. You can really hear that difference. I'm putting it on a little thick there, but that element of playing with that feel can really help. So when you're playing on one of these songs, think, does it need that really fixed sense of timing? And the answer when you're playing a chord melody usually is no. Usually when you're playing a chord melody, it responds much more to that sense of rubato, playing with feeling, having those swells and timing and tone. And then also look at the melody notes that you're playing and the harmony notes and sort of assign importance to them and make sure you're playing those melody notes brighter, using a little bit more of the finger down. Again, you don't need to be going all the way down here. That's how you get that Deliverance banjo sound, but rather just a little bit can make a huge difference in what you're playing, right? So the last concept I want to talk about here today with all of this is I think probably the most important one overall, and that's sustain. right? Sustain is the ability to hold notes longer, essentially, right? And I think that the problem most people have when they're learning to play songs and trying to play them much better is that they lack the ability to have those notes ring right into the next one. So with whatever you're playing, these are some general guidelines that you want to try to adhere to. The first is to make sure that notes ring as long as they can. So let's say that you're playing a G chord, and then you're going to a C chord. And let's say that your chord melody has you do this. Well, some people might play that and play a G chord, and then they need to play the C. So they take the pressure off the strings, and then they move it up and they play a C. And that sounds like this. And you hear that interruption that's taking place, right? That's bad, right? We don't want that. So to help increase the sustain, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the G chord. I'm going to leave all of these fingers fretted until the very last moment. And when I switch to the C chord, I want to look at exactly what needs to take place. In this case, I'm going to remove this finger here. I'm going to remove this finger here. And I'm going to slide this finger up one to the C. And I'm not moving this chord to this chord until my thumb is actually starting the motion. And the reason for that is because we want things to really ring into each other. The ukulele's two biggest weaknesses are range, obviously, and sustain. Trumpet can play a note as long as someone's filled with hot air. And if you're a trumpet player, you probably have a lot of hot air. Just kidding. I had to make the joke of trumpet players. I played saxophone in band for a couple of years, so there was always the, Anyways, so when we're trying to get our maximum sustain from the ukulele, we can't add any sustain. The notes will only ring as long as the strings will vibrate. So we want to make sure we are creating it as creating a most frictionless experience as possible for those strings to ring. And that means leaving the fingers on until you have to move them and transition to the next place. Some other tips for sustain are get your fingers right up next to the fret wire. That can really help so that you don't have to push as hard and that you can get a much better tone as you're trying to push through. Because if you're down here like this, you'll hear I'll get more buzzing and the notes sort of die quicker. But if I'm right here, those notes will ring much longer and much more sound, pun intended. Now, the other thing that you want to look for with sustain is when you're playing open strings, letting those open strings ring. The other weakness that I just mentioned for the ukulele is its tonal range. And the lowest notes that we can play are our open strings. So when we're playing a song that uses open strings, let those open strings ring. Open strings tend to ring longer than closed ones. And if we're moving to another chord, we want to make sure that we're giving those the sort of moment for them to air out, for them to sit and ring before we then move, right? So it's really critical to make the movements just prior to what you want to play. The last concept with sustain for this is when you're transitioning from one chord to the next or one note to the next, try to look to see if there's anything that can be carried over from one chord to the next chord. Because some element of continued sustain, meaning having a note that rings from one chord into the next, can be absolutely brilliant to help bridge the gap between two sections. So an example of this would be if I'm playing a G chord and then I'm going to this A minor 7 chord. Well, the G chord's played, as a normal G is, index on 2nd fret of the C string, ring here on 3rd fret of the E, and middle here on 2nd fret of the A. And then as I slide up to this next chord, which is 0, 4, 5, 3, middle finger on the C string, ring on the E string, and index on the A string, you'll actually notice that our ring finger doesn't have to come off between these movements. And by leaving our ring finger on and continuing the pressure, not necessarily trying to slide, but rather just keeping the pressure on, you can hear that little bit of a slide come through. And what that gives you is the ability for this chord to not sound like it has a big break. If I go like this, it sounds disjointed, but if I go, you hear that little bit of movement can really help tie it together. So whatever notes you're playing, look at the next, set of them and see, is there any finger that doesn't have to come off? Can it stay on as it slides up and moves? Most of this stuff is very subconscious as you play more. You'll naturally start to do it as you learn and as you play, which is really exciting. But being aware of it right now can really help you get over that, jump that hurdle much quicker. And so this stuff takes more practice than anything else I'll ever talk about, because it's all very subconscious and very difficult. So finding songs that work really well for it is important. And what songs work well for it? Well, with timbre, we want to look for songs where we can create different sounds of our ukulele. So things that maybe have a call and response element to them can work. For songs that we're wanting to work on the rubato technique, ones that really can be more emotional tend to work. So ballads and slower songs tend to be a great opportunity to really slow down and let those notes breathe. And then when we're talking about sustain, playing songs that have chords that ring into each other can really help too. I try to make sure with all of my arrangements that they give the opportunity for all three of these concepts to be used, because I use them in my everyday playing, and that's what I look for with sound. And so sometimes you might notice an arrangement online won't have the opportunity for great sustain, or the opportunity for rubato, or the opportunity for you to get that what was the other thing that I mentioned to start? Oh, timbre. And so it's important to find examples that work well for you. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to leave them in the YouTube chat. I'm going to start looking there. I've got also a question I'll answer from the forum. It's Ricky says, you and Andrew do this finesse thing. What is it? Looks like you air slide your fingers up the fretboard and back down. Why, when, how? So when you say air slide, do you mean like we're playing something and we kind of do something like that? Is that what you mean? Where we just sort of move like this? Or do you mean this type of thing? That's a vibrato, which we're not going to be able to get to today, which we will be doing another lesson on, actually, because vibrato's got a lot of stuff that goes with it. But if that's what you mean by the air slide, the hand moving up and down when you're playing something where it's just based on sort of comfort, sort of like a quarterback licking his fingers or something, kind of a weird analogy, but it's just something that you'll start to pick up as you're getting comfortable, because you start getting comfortable with the whole fretboard and getting used to it. So yes. Do you mean yes to this thing, or to the vibrato? Just the first one. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's really just a product of being comfortable with where you are, and almost it's a thought process. When I'm playing something, I'll bring the hand in and sort of use that to visualize, or not really use it. It's more just a product of that. In fact, I now wear a silicone wedding ring, because I used to wear a tungsten one, and on one of my ukuleles, I beat the heck out of right here. And the reason was because I do this so much. I bring the hand up to sort of think whether I'm getting ready to play something, or I'm just thinking in a lesson and bringing the hand up. So kind of funny. So there's a question on the forums which is about staccato chords, and with the Tonight You Belong to Me chord melody. It's Santai. I apologize if I'm butchering the screen name. But this technique to stop the chords from ringing by relaxing the fingers but still keeping them on the strings is incredibly useful, not just to give the piece character and underline the rhythm, but also to keep my playing tidy and reduce the ringing of strings when changing chords. So I definitely want to incorporate more into my playing. Now here's my problem question. I tend to lose a steady grip on the neck of my ukulele when softening my fingers to dampen the chords. I get the slight feeling it might slip, especially when using the U-shaped left-hand form 1, which I understood to be used for bar chords. How can I make sure I still have a good hold of my ukulele even when playing when standing? I can't rest the uke on my thigh. And I love this question because it's subtle. So the way that you do it is the fingers, instead of just the pressure coming off, right? So if I'm playing like that A minor 7 chord I mentioned earlier, the middle finger here on 4 of the C, ring finger here on 5 of the E, and index here on 3 of the A. I'm not just actually playing and then releasing pressure because it feels like the uke's going to fall. What you'll notice, if you look really carefully, is I'm going to take my index finger and it changes its angle. It starts with this sort of, U shape. And when I come off, I'm actually going to be bracing the ukulele with that index finger. And I do this all the time when I'm doing this sort of technique. It's not always the index finger, but it usually is, even on like a G chord here. The index obviously isn't coming down now, but if you look at this part of the index finger, I'm actually using it to kind of cup the ukulele. And right now I'm actually holding it with that sort of motion. An F chord's another great example. With an F chord though, it's not just the index finger. It's also other fingers kind of coming up, and my pinky here is actually supporting the ukulele a little bit. So you'll notice that when I do the on-off, it's not actually just on and off like this. It's on and off a little bit like this, so that the hand can actually hold up the chords. So if I go something like, you'll notice whenever I'm muting, I'm actually bracing the instrument with the undersides of some of the fingers. That's another subconscious thing where eventually that will just happen. The more you practice, the more you'll get comfortable and the more you'll be able to make these switches without the uke feeling like it falls. But just being aware of it and kind of embracing it a little bit as you start to do it will really help expedite the process. Ricky says, could you do the timbre with the notes for I know from the beginning of Tonight You Belong to Me, making the second I know different, even louder or softer? Beautiful, beautiful example, right? Because with Tonight You Belong to Me, it's normally a duet. And in the arrangement, I really focused on more of just one of the voicings. However, at the very beginning, when it's the I know, you belong on to me, or yeah, exactly the right place. So let me pull up in the tab. You'd think I'd remember the arrangement, but I have a toddler and my brain is now a sieve. So when we play Tonight You Belong to Me and we do the first part here of the melody, when it goes with this sound, right? If I make these sound one way and then those a different way, it sounds more like a duet being played. Right? Very, very good example. And with this song, just for kind of continued examples, the beginning part of playing that with a different texture, being more soft, because that's harmony, right? There's no vocals there. But as soon as I play that D note, I'm gonna be more bright. Really fantastic example. So very cool. Awesome. So let's see if there are any other questions in the YouTube. Ricky says, your nail is 1 micrometer longer than mine. Yeah, my nails are not that long. You don't need much to get that sound. Canny, again, I apologize if I mispronounced names. I never knew you could make that sound on a regular uke so close to the bridge. It's pretty cool, right? There's a player named Chris Fuchigami who does a fantastic arrangement of dueling banjos. And it sounds like different instruments because of where he's playing over the bridge for the banjo part. You know, if you're going and then that sounds very different than I'm butchering it so hard. Chris is so much better at that than I am, but you can really start to hear that difference in sound and tone. So cool. So any other questions? Again, I'll be I'll be looking at the YouTube chat here. I'm going to also check the forum just to make sure no one's made a post on there yet. Looks like we're good. Who needs a banjolele? So cool. Yeah, right. It's pretty amazing how much sound you can get from just the south end by the bridge, and the difference of the tone. So Gerald says RC 101 dueling banjo lesson. That sounds pretty fun. I think that he should get Chris to do that one because it is too cool. So awesome. Well, I'm going to hang out for just a few more moments if anyone has any questions. But one thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to tone is this is something that you will notice progress over time more than anything else. So when you're learning how to play your first chords or first strum patterns, progress is made pretty quickly. But with tone, it takes a lot more time, and you might sometimes feel like you're not making the progress you want. And the truth is, it's not necessarily how much practice you did this week, but rather how many weeks you've been practicing it, if that makes sense. The best thing you can do for all of this is play a lot and try to listen to what you're playing and try to get different sounds from what you're playing too. So my last little exercise I want to give you is to be able to play this sort of stuff in as many different soundscapes as you can. So let's say that you're looking at that Mary Had a Little Lamb, right? What if I want to make Mary Had a Little Lamb the most bombastic, dynamic sound possible? So I'm going to use super bright sound, and I'm going to make it really, really emotional. So the rubato I'm going to use here is I'm going to increase the volume and you know, make it go really slow and fast. It would sound something like this, right? Right? That's a very dramatic version of Mary Had a Little Lamb. What if I want it to be much you know, more concise, much more articulate? Maybe I'm going to be playing at a little bit more neutral angle here, and I don't want as much rubato because I want it to be more articulate with the timing. That could be something like this. What if I want it to be like the ending of a song? Well, maybe I'll slow it down and get softer as I go, using the elements of dynamics to slow down as I'm going through. That might be something like this. Right? Very, very different ways of playing the same melody, and it doesn't have to be Mary Had a Little Lamb. It can really be anything. So try to experiment a little bit with getting different sound flavors, so to speak, as you're practicing. Betsy says, would you speak a little bit about how the rhythm challenge can work with a metronome, please? Yes, actually, the next live session that we're going to be doing, or I think it's the next one, but one coming up very soon here, is going to be one all about metronome practice. So this will be used in that, and we'll just be talking about metronomes in general and how to not get super stressed and have anxiety when a metronome's on, because that was my childhood, was anxiety with a metronome. So we'll be doing a whole session on metronome practice very shortly here. Ricky says, I'm gravitating to using index nail and thumb skin for strumming. Is that limiting me in the long run? So for no, that's fine. Using the index nail on your down strums is really preferred. But the thumb skin, for if you're strumming down for a different texture, is great, right? The difference in sound between the index finger and the thumb is going to be very, very big, right? This sound is very different than this sound. What I would recommend is trying to try as many different ways as possible to get different tones, right? Another cool little dynamic instance, I learned this from a random Jake Shimabukuro video online, is if you want a really bright sound when you're strumming, use your nail on your index finger on your down strum and your thumbnail on your thumb for your up. Really bright sound. If you want a warmer sound, open up the hand, use the thumb pad going down, and use the index finger coming up on the pad. So really, really warm sound, really bright sound. Using the concepts we talked about here today of going down, you can get more brightness on it, right? Or more warmth. It's kind of a neat thing to look at. So the more ways you're able to strum and play these things, the better off you'll be. So very cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out to the live session today. If you guys ever have any questions, feel free to leave any comments in the message forum where we post these live sessions. I try to go through them and make sure I answer the questions here in the live session. And even if you're watching this after it's been recorded, feel free to check it out. I'll be checking that forum you know, to see if anybody has any other questions. So I hope you guys have a fantastic week. I will see you next month on July, I think it's 8th, something like that, the second Monday of July. I'm really excited to share with you guys the next lesson that I'm doing here at Rock Class. I'm actually filming it right now, and I just finished the arrangement. If my t-shirt choice is a hint at all, well, it should be for something that might be coming. So I might have said too much already. So I will see you guys next time. Thank you again, and have a fantastic week. I'll see you later.